there has been some evolution in how we leverage AI. We first started with rule-based predictive AI, but now that we have so much development and advancement in the areas of LLM, natural language processing, that provides a very good advantage for us, that we don't have to spend like hundreds of millions of dollars to train our own large data sets. And then we use that readily available technologies, and instead we focus on optimizing, enhancing, and fine-tuning that technology so that it can fit real estate use cases. How the search for property can be shorter, can be more delightful, more efficient. From our side as a platform, that really reduces a lot of cost. So that $130 per transaction now can be reduced to about $20 to $30 per transaction for a $100,000 property.
The more things you put in the app, it's really hard for you to get the PMF. So it's very important to managing the balance between innovations and product to market fit. So if you're being too innovative in the rural, then no one's gonna use. Then it's gonna be useless, right? Your AI is just gonna become a trophy in the cabinet. And for business decisions, it's also the same thing as well. But based on my understanding, building an AI after rural, like building a skyscraper, you need a solid foundations before you get there.
That's a key success factor for people to start interacting with one another, but it's AI GC. And we're increasing the proportion of it, going from 50%, hopefully by next year, going up to 90%. So people are just chatting and interacting with content, fresh content about news on stocks and so forth, all using AI. But one of the things that we also need to caution and is not to go too ahead of ourselves, right? I think that we have held ourselves back from going to recommendations. Even if there are experiments that we're running on it, it has to be paired with our human registered wealth advisors and so forth like that.
AI can do a lot of stuff and things like that, but do consider this whole concept of whether there is the similarity between markets, right? You can draw that and say, oh, credit scores are great, but the truth is, for those people, they do not care because there is zero switching costs.
Hi folks, welcome back to On Call with Insignia, where we go on call with leaders innovating the future of Southeast Asia. In today's episode, let's dial into a conversation on AI and the future of consumer experiences, moderated by Insignia Ventures Partners venture partner Timothy Lee.
I'm going to ask all the founders to come up because I'm actually not going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Instead, because this is an AI panel, and I actually asked a couple of AI bots about you and your companies. I gave them the prompt of, in 2 sentences, introducing each of these companies and their founders. And as I read this out, I would like you to try and figure out where maybe today's cutting-edge technology gets things a little bit wrong. So Anderson, you first, at Ajaib. This is from Claude, which is Anthropic's chatbot. And Claude says that Ajaib is an Indonesian-based investment and stock trading platform. Good so far? Yep. Founded in 2019 by Anderson Sumarli, who previously worked at Gojek, Uber, and UBS Investment Bank, and wanted to make investing more accessible to the masses in Indonesia. The startup has raised $25 million in funding and has over 1 million users on its platform. How does that sound, Anderson?
I wish Dara had hired me when she was at Gojek. So most of it is correct. The experience background is incorrect.
It sounded very confident there. No Gojek, no Uber, no UBS Investment Bank. Okay, next one. Aaron. Let's have a look at Carro. For Carro, I found you on OpenAI ChatGPT. Maybe you have enough history out there. And there was some opinions to it. So I wonder if the audience agrees with this one. Carro is a Singapore-based startup that operates an online marketplace for buying and selling used cars, as well as providing car financing and insurance services. Sound good? Okay, how about this part? The company was founded by Aaron Tan, who has been instrumental in revolutionizing the Southeast Asian automotive industry through Carro's innovative approach to car trading and services. Sound good? What does the audience think?
I bribed the ChatGPT.
Does that go with the biography which we included in the booklet? Okay. Now, Steven, this is one I want you to take a look at what we've said and pick out. I think I got this one pretty wrong. This is from Bing and Claude as well. Super is an Indonesian startup that operates same-day delivery grocery services. Founded by Steven, who previously worked at Uber before starting Super to provide quick grocery delivery to customers. What do you think? That's the first sentence. There's more.
The truth is that I used to road a lot of Uber trip when I was in college, but not working there. And then, yeah, we don't provide same-day delivery services. It's like
You do
24
not.
hours.
That's
Yeah.
you do.
It's not we're not quick commerce.
You're not quick commerce. That's right. It's got this part wrong. It said the startup has raised $28 million in funding and partners with local stores and chains to allow users to get groceries, fresh food, and other daily necessities delivered rapidly via its app. So maybe you'd like to correct some of those misconceptions.
Yeah, I'm not trying to show off, but we've raised more than the 8 million USD. We have raised 106 to date. And yeah, the descriptions of the company is definitely not right.
Do you want to clarify exactly the services that you provide?
Super is a social commerce group buy serving Indonesia tier 2, tier 3 cities and the rural areas. We're empowering community leaders to become self-made entrepreneurs by selling various goods, mainly FMCGs and cosmetics, to their fellow neighborhoods.
I'm glad that we cleared that one up. All right, Dara, for you, Pinhome, and this is from Google Bard. Pinhome is Indonesia's largest property transaction platform, founded in 2019 by Dara, a former private equity and Gojek executive with over 15 years of experience in the tech industry.
Unless you call McKinsey a private equity firm, that's accurate. Correction, 4 years at McKinsey before technology, the past 9 years.
But Gojek was correct, I think.
Correct.
Yes. And Pinhome offers a full-stack, closed-loop property transaction platform, including home search, home financing, and home services for first-time homebuyers.
Good job, Bart.
Thank you for correcting our chatbots on those introductions. So I hope you have a feel for the types of founders here who are creating these consumer experiences in Southeast Asia. It takes a special type of character. And now we know them a bit better than the general collective AI would. I want to start by asking a few questions about those consumer experiences. But first, a little bit of a story. Aaron, I believe when you started Carro, you actually were intending to start it as an AI company testing engine sounds. Can you tell us how that came about?
The engine sound story is always an interesting story. Actually, the guy is somewhere around. I can't see his face. Where's Brian? Professor Brian is sitting somewhere. So my chief scientist and I know him for like almost 20 years. And actually, we know England for 20 years. One day I was in the park with him and then I asked him some random questions that I always interview my data scientists for. And I always ask them sometimes, how do you know whether the engine sound is actually okay? In other words, when you just record the sound, how do you know whether the engine is okay, is good or bad and stuff like that? And most of the data scientists can never actually answer that question because and subsequently I learned how. Main reason, one day again I was in the park with Brian and then I asked him the exact same question thinking that he doesn't know the answer. And then he told me, all you need to do is just record this down, Brian, wherever you're sitting. I still remember what you said, which is Fourier transformation, right? So you record the sound and then you convert the sound from a 3-dimensional domain to a 2-dimensional, right? Using this technique through signaling that's called Fourier transformation. And then after that, you just apply machine learning on it to just match. And then as a result, you are able to tell whether or not the sound is okay, it sounds normal, or it's abnormal. So when he first answered me that question, I was thinking, how the hell does he know all these things? Because this is some guy, and just for background, his PhD, which is from Cambridge, is on nuclear science, right? It's totally nothing to do with data science or AI or computing or machine learning. And he told me this is because sound is physics. So in that sense, this is domain under a physicist, and as a result, he knows all these things. And when he was doing his PhD thesis, it was actually to check whether or not the nuclear reactors are fracking the uranium or whatever not properly. And that was really how we started this whole conversation, and that's how today, as much as possible, every car that we buy in, we try to make sure that we listen to the engine of the sound to ensure that the car actually is functioning properly or will function properly moving forward. That's one application of what we do using AI across our business.
So it really works. Brian was right.
Brian was correct. He actually did the model wherever Brian is, but yes.
That's pretty fascinating. Of course, now Carro is not known as just an engine analysis company, but the full service from buying a car to owning one and financing one. So in that customer journey, where is AI applied?
So we try to look at this really as a tech company, and the backstory, we only have a few minutes, right? But I think the backstory here is that one day, I still remember in the early days of this business, I asked one of my engineers who returned back. He was from Malaysia. And then he says, I went back home and then it was Chinese New Year and I told my friends what I was doing. And then I asked him, so what do you tell your friends about Carro, right? How do you describe it? He says, I work for a car dealer. And from then onwards, I think this was very early on in this business, 2016, I said, okay, moving forward, every single town hall, I'm going to remind everybody we're a tech company first. And that's the truth. So when we started this business, we thought of this as like a Carfax KBB business. Really, that was really how Carro started at the very onset. In fact, we owned this domain called graph.co or something like that for the longest period of time. And we wanted to just try to understand the pricing of vehicles, condition of vehicles, etc., etc. But we just couldn't get it done because at the point in time when we started, we had the worst of mistakes, right? Which is we didn't have the data, right? Not only do we not have the data, we didn't have data that was considered editorial. Right? And while the machine can be extremely accurate based on whatever regression testing or rather machine learning techniques that you have, truth is that the consumers will never give your prices, right? So what we learned practically is that at a point in time, we scrapped the plan of starting off with a data approach first. We started off by selling the cars first, embedding this with banks, right? So today, the banks, most of them have an MOU with us. They actually partner with us to find out pricing on the vehicles itself. And that sort of set up the benchmarks for this. So a lot of times today, we are able to say that our pricings are accurate, but actually follows it. And then, of course, subsequently with the Carfax business, that's another thing by itself. We really think about whole journey and think about how do we use data to better the whole process. It can be machine learning driven, it may not be machine learning driven, but the whole emphasis for us, at least the last 1.5 years, 2 years, really is how do we use data to better every single step of the process and how do we step change all the functions that we have one by one. From the start of buying the car, pricing the car, reconditioning the car, to selling the car, financing the car, doing insurance, after sales, the whole spectrum of it. How do we put data? That's high level what we do.
Thank you for that. Now, Dara, I want to ask you a little bit about from buying cars to buying a home, maybe financing a home. There's also some similarities. And one of the things about buying a home is it's very conversational. Usually you have many back and forths. I'm curious, in that process, how are you applying conversational AI in your journey?
Absolutely. To answer that, I'd like to ask the audiences a question. By raise of hands, how many of you or who among you actually have purchased or rented a property? Okay, everyone raised their hands. And how many of you, when you are exploring to rent or buy property, basically went just directly to make the minute you saw the listing, immediately you make payments, I'm ready to purchase, I'm ready to rent. Raise of hands. Wow, there's 2 of you but that's already for me very surprising because typically for a renter to commit to a transaction, they would converse 1,000 chats with 15 different agents. And for a buyer, they have to converse 3,300 line of chats with the agents. And typically more than 15 agents. For Indonesia standard, that's 20 agents. Those who raised your hand that you were just confident to make purchase or payment when you saw the listing without having any conversation, you're very key. Maybe you're meeting the right agent or the right listing in the right market. Everything was just set for perfection. It's not the case for 99% of our users. So we realized that, right? And so what we do is we are building a platform for home seeking, home financing, and home services. We serve first-time home buyers. How the journey started is on the supply side, you have owners, property agents, and property developers uploading their listings. And then on the consumer side, then they will discover those listings through our mobile app and website. And how then AI basically being leveraged is in the process of renting or transacting, there's 6 steps usually to get to closing, to the transaction. You first need to discover the listing, then you have to connect with the agent. You will then schedule viewing. After that, you will explore financing, negotiate pricing, and then at the end, it's payment, right? And every step of the way, if all these processes are done manually, and before our platform, it was the case, this is a 3 months process. And it would cost about $150 to process from inquiry all the way to closing. It would involve more than 15 agents, more than 50 listings, extremely complex, time-consuming, and also very resource-consuming for consumers. So we're embedding AI, and of course, we are a 3-4-year-old company. There has been some evolution in how we leverage AI. We first started with rule-based predictive AI, but now that we have so much development and advancement in the areas of LLM, natural language processing, that provides a very good advantage for us that we don't have to spend like hundreds of millions of dollars to train our own large data sets. And then we use that readily available technologies. And instead, we focus on optimizing and enhancing and fine-tuning that technology so that it can fit real estate use cases. So when users are looking for listings, we build capabilities with AI to allow for accurate property recommendations, enhancing listing quality by, let's say, removing watermarks automatically, or generating descriptions of listings automatically. That really helps with supply liquidity. Connecting with the agents, that automated allocation started with, of course, rule-based predictive AI, and now we're venturing into really leveraging data sets, understanding where conversion happens the best, what kind of archetype of users versus agents. That also will enhance that. And then in financing, allocating to the bank that gives the highest likelihood for approval. And then lastly, I think negotiation, home value estimation. And so I think for us, so that's on the consumer side, right? How the search for property can be shorter, can be more delightful, more efficient. From our side as a platform, that really reduces a lot of cost. So that $130 per transaction now can be reduced to about $20 to $30 per transaction. For a $100,000 property, and our revenue is typically about $3,000, gross profit is 50%. $127, $30, that means it's almost 10% of tax costs. Now we reduce it to 20%, and that's where the benefit.
Thank you for sharing the data. And I did not realize there were that many text conversations in the process of buying a house, and also that cost reduction is pretty stunning. I hope the audience all understands by now that this is an interactive session, so you'll be asked either a poll, thank you for doing that, but I will also be asking you guys for questions to the panel, so you can start thinking about what those might be. In the meantime, Steven, I know that a lot of what Super does, and thank you for clarifying exactly what you do earlier, is when you apply AI and data science to it, it's in the background and maybe in an ops setting. But can you explain how you are using AI in that customer journey as well?
Sure. So there are two things that AI could be applicable in my business, but the key of executing business after rural market is simplicity. There are the customer-facing sections. There are business decisions sections. For the customer-facing sections, it has to be very, very simple. Means that you got to understand the cell phone that they are using are the second hand that the first tier city were used, right? So if you're going to the second tier, they'll get one cell phone behind us. Means that back in the days, there was BlackBerry. BlackBerry were being passed to the rural, and we start using an S1, S2 Samsung, or back then iPhone, the early smartphone. And then it always been like that. So that's number one. We cannot really applying AI yet.
Well, your customers are largely in tier 2, tier 3 cities, not in Jakarta. So we have to make sure we're in that right mindset.
Exactly. Whereas the GDP per capita is lower than 5,000 USD. That's the thing that we got to understand, right? So the more you put on the app, the more things you put in the app, it's really hard for you to get the PMF. So it's very important to managing the balance within innovations and product to market fit. So if you're being too innovative in the rural, then no one's going to use. Then it's going to be useless, right? Your AI is just going to become a trophy in the cabinet. And for business decisions, it's also the same thing as well. Based on my understanding, building an AI after rural, like building a skyscraper, you need a solid foundations before you get there. The first stage is building a bank of data, set of data. Second is deep learning, whereas this deep learning will assess the data and extracting and interpreting. And the machine learning will be able to give you some advice, what the things that you need to do. AI will help you to decide. And Super right now, it's in the bank of data and the inceptions of deep learning. So we're not yet to the AI. Why is that? Same thing. People who are executing things too in the rural is not as advanced as in the capital city. So you see, if you even build an AI throughout the system, they don't even understand how to bank the data properly. So that's the thing that we need to tackle before going onward, Tim. But then, if you're asking me for the future, I think AI will help us in the business decisions to decide, let's say, it's a summer season, and in the eastern area, they like spicier food, and then what kind of spices that they would like to eat, and giving us much better predictable distributions towards the SKUs that we need to sell during those seasons and so on. But at this point, I would say we're still building towards it. I think we're not there yet, but we're at the foundations out of it. And it has to be properly addressed before we are going to the AI. Therefore, the team can execute well and use properly to interpret, extracting, and decide for making a better business decisions, and at the right time, whereas the devices is suitable, right? And having a capacity to load, because the more you put an AI over there, then it's going to slow down the app loading. And then if you've seen the data, right, the 10 seconds kind of things, they will drop at 10 seconds. And so once we put one AI, it can be like 15 seconds, 20 seconds. That's not the thing that we're trying to chase early in the day. I would say that's pretty much it about Super today.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you gave that color of the consumer mindset, especially in those tier 2, tier 3 cities. And understanding where you want to apply these types of technologies to better their experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're asking for it just because we see that in some of the capital cities. But one of the places where we do hear a lot of demand or questions about whether AI can be applied is whether it can help us make some money. We as investors think about this. And Anderson, I know you've given plenty of thought to both the content generation, but then also the investment recommendations as a stock brokerage. Can you tell us about how you've been applying AI in a couple of different areas in your business?
Sure. First of all, I just want to echo what Steven and Dara mentioned. One of the big challenges of running a consumer tech company in Indonesia is that you're going to have to interact with masses, millions and millions of mass retail segment. You're going to have such a great distribution to reach them with low CAC, and the cost to serve needs to be incredibly low as well. Now, that's not always easy because when you go to second tier or when you go to interact with complex products like property or in our case, money, they want to interact with you in person. They want to have more information. They want to have more knowledge. So one of our challenges running a stock brokerage or crypto exchange or even the bank is that we got to find a way to serve the customers in a low cost method. And this is where we found opportunities using AI, leveraging it to help us serve folks with lower costs, similar to Dara mentioning about the cost to serve them. One of the ways that we're doing it is that in Indonesia, you got 98% of the population that's never invested in capital markets before. The way that they start learning about it is that they have to talk to the community. They have to learn with one another. Ajaib was born with a Reddit-style community page already embedded within it. And millions of interactions happen every week, every month. Right now, we've been using generative AI to absorb all the complex articles and news pieces, thousands and thousands of them that's going all over the place online. And we summarize them into pieces that's very easy for them to digest and interact with. So within our millions and millions of interaction, actually today, more than half of those content are generated by our AI. And so we say that now there's a movement. It's no longer user-generated content or UGC. That's a key success factor for people to start interacting with one another, but it's AIGC. And we're increasing the proportion of it going from 50%, hopefully by next year going up to 90%. So people are just chatting and interacting with content, fresh content about news on stocks and so forth, all using AI. But one of the things that we also need to caution and is not to go too ahead of ourselves, right? I think that we have held ourselves back from going to recommendations. Even if there are experiments that we're running on it, it has to be paired with our human registered wealth advisors and so forth like that. But what we're really excited by is to see how AI would reduce the cost to serve in all of financial services. So we can go into the tier 2, go in with a tier 3 with a very low cost model.
Quite curious about that human in the loop that you've kept there, especially for the investment recommendations and also the research. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel you still have to have a human?
One of the things that we've done is that we're very big on retail customers, but we also have a segment of affluent and also institutions like yourselves. We also serve you guys. And we figured out that people want research reports, equity research reports, market research reports. And actually, if you look deeper into those research reports, a lot of it is just a function of summarizing multiple things, whether it's investor calls or whether it's their latest financials or whether it's whatever announcement that they made, right? We actually now generate equity reports very quickly because whenever there's an earnings call, immediately we take it in, we digest it, and using AI, we immediately produce a document. The only portion of those equity research that we cannot generate fully yet using AI is the recommendation, is the price point, buy, sell, hold, whatever, right? Of course, you have like consensus direction. You can get it from Bloomberg, you can get it from many places. You can leverage off other analysts' ratings, and you can do some technical analysis there. But the issue is that in Indonesia stock market, it's not a perfect market. So even if you go and look at fundamentals, or even if you do some basic technical analysis, it just doesn't work. So that's why we have to pair it up with our licensed investment advisors, because there's no substitute with them sitting in front of a CEO of a public company, breathing the same oxygen, right? And saying, are you credible or not when you're telling me about the plans of your company, right? So until you can substitute that, right now we are pairing on recommendations on investments or money decisions with a registered wealth advisor or analyst.
Thanks for sharing that. Now, I'm sure there's a number of areas, and I think you've touched on it in this case, where you've tried things with AI, and I want to make sure the panel has a chance to talk a little bit about what hasn't worked too, because a lot of this is about experimentation. Dara, I know that you've also, in the same vein as Anderson, tried to estimate home prices. You've got a home value estimator and so on. Can you tell us about some of the areas which have been challenging, or where you've decided maybe AI is not the best place to apply?
Sure, Tim. So I've talked a little about how AI can be used to kind of power conversations, right? And there are three types of conversation. It is informational conversation, it's consultational conversation, and then lastly, it's transactional conversation. And right now, the biggest degree of AI implementation is in informational and conversational. I would say highest is in informational, asking questions about, hey, is it located near a certain POIs? And then is it negotiable? Is it in the floating area? So informational. Consultational would be like, hey, can you give me more options with this criteria, filtering criteria or characteristics? Or could you exclude out properties, let's say in a one lane road, because I only want 2-lane roads, right? That's in the consultational. And then in the transactional is, what is the value of the property? What is the market estimate? And we've tried all those, and I think all of those have worked. And then increasingly now we are, improving the degree of usage of AI across those three areas. But where AI hasn't worked for us is using that information, for example, home value estimate, as a basis for acquiring property or investing in property. And the reason for that is because while AI is good in estimating value of a property, it will give you price range. And that price range, it really depends on the supply, demand, liquidity you have for certain areas. Where supply liquidity is high, you have high number of listings, and that number of listings are being transacted, and you see how the market responds to that price. Then the range becomes very narrow to a point where you can be very confident this is the price for that property and I'm willing to bet for it. And maybe in a more developed market like the United States, where data is very structured and more transparent, it could work. But even then, there's still some areas where AI wouldn't be able to capture and embed that in the model. So
this is quite interesting, because you have the examples of the iBuyer types of companies like Zillow or Open Door in the US. And what I think I hear you saying is that it doesn't work great when there's no structured data.
Exactly. And there's lack of transparency or lack of liquidity, whether that's on the demand side or the supply side. So the AI is really good at estimating intrinsic value if, let's say, external factors are all constant and it's not like behaving erratically. But when you add, and if there are extrinsic factors, so for example, the government just, let's say, increase the property tax, right? There'll be higher supply liquidity that would reduce price because there's higher competition. The government just increase, let's say, interest rate, core interest rate. That would affect the demand side, because then all of a sudden the disposable income and the DBR ratio then becomes more problematic, hence less demand, hence property price tends to drop. So all these external extrinsic factors AI are not able to capture. It's so completely unpredictable. And so we've actually experimented with secondary iBuying, purchasing of property in resale or secondary property market, and we use AI in that exercise. And what AI was able to give us is a wide range, plus minus 20% standard deviation rate, which is very risky. Plus minus 20% is scary. But then in primary property market, that could work though, because estimate is a bit more controlled, the cost plus price, and usually developers wouldn't go beyond a certain point. And that is how we're using, for example, AI. Of course, with calibrations and some operational approach as well, use that to make investment into real estate property development projects. And it's still at a pilot stage, but that could work just because the extrinsic factors could be calibrated well, because we know the cost to build that properties and the land price range could be estimated better. That could work for emerging markets.
I think that's a helpful lesson for all of the founders here, that there are aspects and areas of the market where applying AI can be risky, where you don't have the right data. How about you, Aaron? Are there areas where you have tried to apply AI and found it hasn't worked?
There are many for us internally, right? So we employ AI techniques, AI strategies on various things, ranging from computer vision, sound to pricing. Like Dara herself, we do a lot on pricing, but actually more from pricing standpoint, but more on credit, because we do have quite a sizable loan book within the company itself, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out who are the best customers to lend to. And I'm happy to say that our NPL across the globe, across the region, is about 1% or just under. So honestly, we do have a very healthy NPL ratio compared to any of our peers. But that said, I feel that the whole process of doing AI on credit analysis is not exactly the greatest and the easiest, especially in the emerging markets. And I'm not saying that because I feel that there's a lack of data from that standpoint, or for that matter, lack of historical data. I feel that there is a difference in understanding of switching cost, right? So in the United States, if you ever default on your credit, in China, if you ever default on your credit, it's going to be tough to get a credit card moving forward. It's going to be tough to get a loan moving forward. Life is going to be hard, especially in China. You pretty much get locked out of everything. But the same cannot be said for Indonesia, and it cannot be said for Thailand or other developed markets. It's tough. And if you look at first-tier cities, maybe there's still some switching costs for that matter. But if you move out further, third, fourth-tier cities, it becomes very apparent that the switching costs, in that sense, I'm just using the word loosely, switching costs, but conceptually that's what I'm trying to say, right? Because you can use all the AI, all the data, all the back testing, the regressions that you can do and say, oh, you know what? I think this guy, I can lend him money, right? Because my model says so. The truth is that this cannot apply to the third or fourth tier city people, whereby the switching cost is entirely different. They can just drop one day, right? Or drop one day in the sense that they can just decide to default the next day. The same for students, right? And stuff like that. So I think coming back to this, we have tried to do AI on many things. And I do have to say that there is a higher correlation of defaults for customers, even though the AI might have screened and say, okay, but a higher correlation with people in the third, fourth tier cities, simply because of that. And honestly, I don't have a good way to resolve this issue. And in the end, we decided to do it ancient way of doing things, right? So we decided that the best way to do is to expand the financing business in a hub and spoke model. So you have to have someone quite within 10 kilometers where he stays. And I think that has at least appeared from my standpoint as CEO of the business, that I think that has controlled the default rates. And I think that's something that we always tell people externally. AI can do a lot of stuff and things like that, but do consider this whole concept of whether there is the similarity between markets, right? You can draw that and say, oh, credit scores are great, but the truth is, for CP people, they do not care because there is zero switching costs.
Thanks for that. We've come to the end of time. Unless there's any other burning questions, I'd like to thank all our panelists here for your time. And thank you for putting up with the misintroductions that we made at the beginning.
Thank you for joining us on this call. Make sure you get notified on when to dial in by following us wherever you're listening to us. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, toss in a like, and let us know if you'd like to hear more of this topic in the comments. See you all in our next call.